Is the camera ready to record?
Okay, this is... Everybody wants you to just introduce yourselves first. So, Midge, feel free.
I am formally Kitah Vas Nunes, though I'm known in the community as Midge. I've been a temple member longer than I can remember, and I want to tell you that my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, his name was Zalman Scott, and he presented one of the early Torahs to Bnei Israel. And it's in use, as I assume all the Torahs are that we possess. And it's very interesting. On the either side, they have a wooden handle, and Zalman Scott is engraved on both the handles. So I really feel that when I come here, it's coming home and very, very much a part of my life. I treasure the Bnei Israel for everything that's good and helpful and fair. Now, when my grandfather presented it to the temple, the Torah, I was not born. I am 96 years old as I speak to you. And of course, when my grandfather, I can't tell you the date, unfortunately, everything that came from anywhere to Bridgeport had to come by way of the river, Long Island. There were no trains, no buses, it was the horse and buggy. And one day, my grandfather had said to a very good friend of his in New York that he wanted to present Bnei Israel with a Torah, but it was such a big deal to get into New York by boat up the river and then to get around in New York. This, remember, was 100, and I don't know, must be, from what I understand, somewhere around 140 years ago. So he commissioned his friend to buy a Torah for him to present to Bnei Israel. And he told his friend he didn't want him to buy one of these huge Torahs. He wanted one that was not especially small, but just right. And I guess he told him he wanted to spend up to whatever and where. I don't have those details. He got word sometime later that his friend had bought what he thought was right, according to my grandfather's description, and it was coming up by way of Long Island from New York on a certain day at a certain time. And my grandfather, Zalman, was manufacturing sailors' uniforms for the Civil War up on what is now Golden Hill Street. I don't know whether you know it or not. And later on, he decided he was going to go into his own men's clothing. And he had his name on the big men's furnishings, and Main Street, I will tell you, what is now Main Street, we refer to it as downtown, was all along the riverfront. You probably all know where the Port Jefferson Ferry goes. Well, that was all Main Street, okay? So my grandfather got word that on a certain day when the certain boat came up at the time, he was to go down, they would be shipping the Torah. And he had an idea that though he said not too big, they no doubt, I don't know, they had very few Torahs, he no doubt thought they would get a tremendous one. And he had a men's furnishing store, as I mentioned before, and he had an African-American gentleman, black of course, working for him around the store. And he arranged for this man that works for him to go down to the dock when the boat came in from New York, because he thought it would be huge and he could never carry it alone. Well, little did he know that it was not huge. I don't know what category it fits in for size. And then came this beautiful Torah with wooden handles and Zalman Scott engraved or chiseled out, carved. And you can see it because it's read as the others are very often. So that gave us all a special feeling. And I had been away for many years and came back some 35 years ago, and I just thought every time they took the Torah out that I was so special. I thought I owned it, you know, going back historically with my grandfather. And that's what I want to tell you about. And it's a very interesting Torah. The contents, of course, you know, are invaluable. But the handles with Zalman, it was Sidney in English, but his Hebrew name was Zalman, Z-A-L-M-O-N, Scott. And that's the history of the Scott Torah. Very interesting. I, of course, was not born. And Alan Shemupsky spoke to me about a year ago, and he figured out or assumed that that Torah was at least 135 or 140 years. And you know we're getting ready to celebrate 150th. So it was very early, and that's about all I can tell you. If there's anything that I can answer, you can feel free to question me. Interesting, isn't it? I wasn't even born. Take 96 from 150. That's it. And I'm sure, Ira, that most all the Torahs have a nice and a beautiful story attached to them that makes them more valuable to us. That's all that was handed down to me. It was before I was ever born.
So he was your maternal grandfather?
I beg your pardon?
Wait, he was just your normal grandfather, not like your great-grandfather?
I didn't know him. This was all before I was born.
But your parents never told you anything about it?
They always talked about what a beautiful human he was and how beloved he was by his community and all good things. He was a very outgoing, lovely man, and very interested, of course, in the temple. That's Reformed is comparatively new when you think of the history of our religious paths.
That sort of answers one of our questions. Was your family religious? You sort of answered
no, we were, as I remember it, we had not religious, all the holidays, not the little ones, but Yom Kippur, all the big ones we always were conscious of. And I lost my mother when I was a very little girl. I never really knew her. I hardly remember her. So I think we knew we were Jews and very proud of it, and always Orthodox. My belonging here broke the ice, and a brother of mine, as far as our family going, always Orthodox and then conservative. But I hope you never lose your interest and your love for B'nai Israel, because it becomes your Jewish, not only your heritage, but your family. You see, all my family are gone. I was the baby of 11. and they're all gone. I'm the only Unger, that was my maiden name, left of my time. So I treasure it. When I come, I feel, oh, I'm coming home, my community, and all my Jewish friends, how wonderful. It's a very warm, very fulfilling feeling, and I hope you have it, never lose it. It's very important.
Guys, can I duck in with one question?
Yeah.
Midge, when the synagogue became Reform about 100 years ago,
Yeah.
did your family stay in the synagogue or did they go to Rodef?
No, they stayed in it.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
B'nai Israel was not always.
No,
was-
B'nai Israel did not start out Reform, it started out Orthodox. That's how come Ms. Vas Nunes' grandfather could be here, because it was Orthodox in the beginning.
Yeah.
There was no Reform when B'nai
There
Israel
was
began.
no, that's right. And Ira knows the story perhaps better than I do, but this was handed down to me as an Unger story. You know, when this state and this city we'll talk about started, it was on the water, which made it very valuable. There were no trains, no buses, no airplanes. Everything had to come up on the Long Island Sound, and there were a handful of German Jews, and if you know I'm incorrect, don't hesitate to correct me, Ira. And they had gotten together, and they wanted to have a synagogue and their own way. And at that time, the temple was made up of immigrants from Russia, from Poland, from all over that were immigrating to America for a lot of freedoms, and religious freedom, of course, won. And they got together, and they couldn't decide where they should go. Orthodox, Reformed was not. It was farming they were talking about, it may be a handful. And there were a group of German Jews who were very tight and close. And they came up with the idea of ultimately it would be Reform, because the Reform movement was just beginning. Do you understand? You were either conservative or Orthodox. And after, I guess, battling it around and a lot of yeas and nays and all, they decided by vote, it was very fair, that they would create their own synagogue, and it would be on the principle of Reform Judaism that was just taking hold. And it grew, and it grew, and the Orthodox went one way, and then here we had a representation of everybody that was Jewish that prayed. And it just grew and grew as the movement did. You know, everybody thought, nuts. What the devil are they talking about? Reformed, you know. The Bible and the prayers and everything are there in Hebrew. It's so written. So a courageous group of German Jews banded together, and what you are part of now is their sweat and tears and fights and everything, I'm sure, but it came to pass.
All right, one of your questions, guys, go ahead.
Did the Holocaust impact you or your family?
Not directly to the point of any of our relatives that we knew of were in that, though my husband was among the, who was with, can't even think of his name, Blood and Guts.
Patton.
He was with the General Patton, and he was the first American group to go into Auschwitz, to free them and all that kind of thing.
At the end of the war.
Yeah, and he comes from a Sephardic, which tells you the Sephardim, they're Spanish Jews originally. And I'm not going into your history, but you know there was an Inquisition where Queen Elizabeth said all the Catholics and all the Jews must leave Spain unless they convert. And many of the Jews went to Holland, where my husband was born. They consider themselves Dutch Jews, and a great majority went to South America, because you know, you wonder how the heck did Jews get to South America? So they went along and stuck with their religion, and everything just grew, and it's fine until this big renovation. To me, I was brought up Orthodox, and we always spoke of our shul, our little shul, how it was such a part of our life. And though we just completed a miraculous job on giving us vast room to pray and follow our religion, I still think of it as my little shul. But I have to confess, I'm not able to get around. I am arthritis, and the walking and moving is very difficult. But I came here, I was fortunate enough for one of my friends to offer to chauffeur me to Shabbat services Friday night. And about 3 weeks ago, I walked in, and I just kept shaking my head at what it has become. And I kept saying to myself, I've never admitted it till now, where's my little shul that my grandparents were part of, and my Torah there? Marvelous, but it was an entire shock to me. You know what I'm saying? You walk in, it's very imposing, very grand. And that's all I can tell you, but it's still my little shul in my heart. I haven't changed that. My regret is that I don't get here as often as I can. It always takes someone to chauffeur you, and that's not easily done. Are there any questions?
Yes, there
I'll try
are.
to answer. Oh, thank you. I have a million, man. I need this one. Thank you.
Okay, Ben, go.
A hairpin. No questions?
Have you ever been to Israel?
Oh, yes, I have been several times.
What memories do you have from your visits?
Beautiful memories from nothing but dry earth, magnificent country, and has everything first class, from physical to historic to beauty to the eye and soul. If I were able to get around, I would have long ago made my third visit. I was all through every part of it. I was 6 weeks, my beloved husband, and we were always thirsty to go back. I wanted to go through the sand dunes and just took everything in. Very, very interesting. You can see where our stories and our love has taken place, when you see there and then you go through all the deserts, and very wonderful. I hope if any one of the 4 of you have not been, that you will have the pleasure of seeing it before you get in and your life's little nook for good. Wonderful. Have any of you been?
Yeah.
You have, you too? Well, isn't it fantastic? It looks like there is nothing but dirt and sand, and everybody with 2 hands. And look what's on your plate in front of you, everything.
Was there one place in particular that sticks in your mind, a memory with Manny in Israel?
Well, it was very joyous, and he had some second cousins who formerly lived on Long Island, and they were so orthodox, I couldn't begin to explain. and we got to the King David, I believe, hotel, and there were these two women with bouquet of flowers bigger than they were to welcome us and greet us. That stays in my mind. The old city and the wall, and if you go to the wall at night and do a little climbing, I don't have to tell you. Everything was special.
Ted, do you have another question?
Joyous, I hope you guys get to go while you're still young enough to be impressionable about such places that you have not been. Well, you have, you said. Lucky guy, you too?
Ted has.
Hey,
No, I
you
haven't.
lucked
No, I
out.
haven't.
You
And
have.
Alex has, and Alex is going back to his bar mitzvah in June.
You're going to be bar mitzvah there?
No,
What temple? The great big one?
I don't know, but I'm not gonna be bar mitzvah there.
Well,
you're
you're reading
not.
Torah there.
I
Sure.
went to a
You're doing it twice.
bar mitzvah there. Do you know the Batats?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I went to a bar mitzvah there, and a whole weekend in the big temple. There's the old one,
Heichal Shlomo, the chief
the biggest
rabbi.
one, not
Yeah.
too far from the wall. And that was the trip of my life. There was the service, and the women sat upstairs. And as the service and ceremony ended, they all were mazel tov and clapping and singing. And they took handful of candy and threw it down on the floor ground where the bar mitzvah had taken place.
That is cool. So if you're on Halloween, you can candy anyway.
Oh no,
Has everyone else had a chance to ask a question yet?
spirit is
Let's make sure we
different.
get to everybody because we're running low on time.
You know, you're a Jew, and so proud of it when you see from dry earth what we have that's ours.
How long have you been a member at B'nai Israel?
Oh God, I don't know, 45, 50 years. Long, long time. I've been away for many years, but I came back, and I would be living here for the programs if I could get around. There's something for everyone, from guys your age to old ladies like myself. It's here, presented on a tray. If our congregants realize what we have, how joyous I would be. Good turnouts to support it, but it's wonderful. You guys will be the next leaders.
Yes, they will.
Were you bar mitzvahed?
Girls were bat mitzvahs. Girls did not count when I was a little girl and growing up. Only the young men were bar mitzvah. There was no such thing as bas mitzvah.
Although Midge, here, the boys weren't bar mitzvah at B'nai Israel either, were they?
What? No. None of my brothers were bar mitzvah.
They were confirmed?
No. I have a very unusual background of parenting. And you know my history, losing my mother in that horrific burned to death, and my brother and sister. And we had a hard time surviving.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to go to Cheder on Green Street, the inside, on the in the street there. There was an Orthodox. It's on Park Avenue, that little one right across from Rodolph Shore.
Baker Cholim.
Baker Cholim. And I remember my father. We did not have money to just spend for this or that. My father was a hardworking man. And I remember him talking to my aunt. I overheard it. She had a restaurant in Coney Island on the main walk. And he asked her if she could loan him $500 because he wanted to contribute to the building on Green Street. I don't know where it was before, the east side. And they were very Orthodox. I remember stories, all the old Orthodox family. And I used to look down, and my father would always look up, and for some reason, he sat in the front row on the end seat, not far end, but nearest the Torah, and he used to wear a big tallis, you know, that you would see your face. And I remember we always had to sit up where the ladies sit in the first row because Papa would look up and smile and, oh, that's good, you kids are here. That's all I can tell you.
Do we have another question, guys?
Yeah. How has the temple changed over the years?
How what?
How's the temple changed over the years?
Well, that's a special question. We haven't changed in our religious beliefs and sermons. Sermons are different, appropriate to the existing time. There have been several prayer book changes. I'm not in that area, but I believe it was necessary. Our prayer book is so easy to read, and the understanding is not as difficult as it used to seem to me. It's grown tremendously. We have a cross-section of wealthy, not so wealthy, ordinary, hardworking students. We have such a wonderful mixture of people that if you don't find a comfortable spot here as your religious place, then it doesn't exist. And everyone is given respect and affection from everyone else. It's wonderful. I call it my synagogue. I think I own it. I never get too often, physically I'm not able to, but I always participated in all the big things, as you know, and the little things, and I can say I was one of the 4 that made the first Jewish habitat possible here, and feeding the hungry. I can't go into it. When I hear the chairman of committees tell about something and say, oh, who will? I didn't know any better. My right hand always went up. And the joy, I want you guys to know and think about it. The joy of, bad dentures, the joy of giving is beyond my telling you about. So give, participate. If you're not a singer, if you can dance, if you can't dance, talk. Be part of it to keep it alive and something for everybody. If you don't find it here, it's non-existent religiously and fraternally. I call it my family. I'm the only one left in my family. And I think this is my Jewish family here. Think about it. And as you get older and get around, you no doubt will visit on many occasions different synagogues, and you will remember what I tell you. Very special.
Midge, fantastic. And you haven't lost your whole family because you've got all of us.
Oh, thank God.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
God. This is a
We need to
pleasure.
get a picture of the guys. Why don't you get around behind Ms. Vas Nunes?
So what age
Snap
group are you
still.
guys in?
13.
Oh.
These are all 7th
Pretty
graders.
girl. Aren't they nice? Come on over
We bar
here.
mitzvah last week, bar mitzvah the week before, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, 2 weeks.
Oh.
Bar mitzvah 2 months ago?
No,
just a month.
November 1st. It
Just
feels
November
like a
1st, just
long
month.
time
Feels like a long
ago.
time. He's the only one left out of this bunch.
Okay.
Yeah, guys,
They'll
Alex, come
get
around
you,
this side.
kid. They got their prongs in you. You're gone.
Okay. Midge, I'll be right back to bring you
Bye,
upstairs.
Well, wasn't that nice?
Midge, while you're there,
Stay good.
I have a question while you're there.
Yeah.
Can you just tell me about the different rabbis who have been here?
Record that? Good.
The different rabbis that have been here through your memory?
No, I don't remember too much, excepting, he was the dean of them early. I can't think of him.
Rabbi Martin, maybe?
Martin.
What do you remember about Rabbi Martin?
Well, he was everything that defined a rabbi.
I'm just gonna close the door, please tell me.
Yeah. He was everything. He
Yeah.
was lovable, warm, generous. You know that this was referred to as the temple, begging your pardon, if you will. And he never was that way. And when this temple, not all that many years ago, came down to the real earth and realized that we Jews are Jews, some differing in many ways, it became a new area. When I just met the last rabbi before Jim,
Cher? Rabbi Cher?
Cher, Arlie, I just met him, and he took the first few shovels of whatever to make this what it is today. I have a lot of respect for him, and this was known as the temple. And when you said, where do you worship? The temple, the Park Avenue, hoi polloi. It was all what you had more than, I would say, who you were. And I was very happy with the rabbis from Martin down. Every one of them were lovely. And the cantors too, we've been very fortunate. And of course now, there's nothing left to praise Jim Prosnett. He is, in my opinion, the epitome of it all. He's so down to earth, and he wears whatever the occasion demands so graciously and well that you think, well, it's only you that he's doing or helping. Love him dearly, and his family, of course, have grown so. And that's about all. There was always the board, you know, who made the ultimate, no matter what I thought of you. But I was on the board, and nothing was taken lightly. One year, Jim said to me, I want to ask something of you, Midge. I said, if it's at all possible. When he first came, I heard some of the congregants saying rabbi, by his last name, and Jim. And that kind of shook me. So one day I said to him, Rabbi Jim Prosnett, I hear you called by several titles. Would you tell me how you prefer? Because to me it was always rabbi. And he said, Midge, you can call me Jim, you can call me James, you can call me anything you're comfortable with. And when I see him in a group, I always call him Rabbi. And whenever it's one-to-one or few, he's Jim. And I think we have it all as far as the rabbinate goes. He's a compassionate man. He's very knowledgeable. I'm surprised that he didn't become a teacher in the Hebrew world. He's a wonderful teacher. And he's compassionate. And he can't remember everyone and what's gone on. But if you ever call him, I remember when I knew I was losing my husband any minute, and my husband was with Patton, and he was a captain in military intelligence. And I knew that that would put him so at rest to have a military funeral here. But I had never been to one, and I didn't know the rabbis or protocol here. And I called Jim, and he said, absolutely. And he said, have it full, and if you want the, what are these, Scotland, the Highlanders with their skirts and their music, if you want that on the bema to play anything special, or at Manny's grave, permissible. I didn't go that far, but Manny had a military funeral here, and I was very happy because how proud he was of being an American. He came from Amsterdam when he was 7, and he was in having a military intelligence, and he could tell you stories from Auschwitz, the first going in. You couldn't believe, and the first 6 or 7 years I was married, I could never broil any meat because he told me the stench of humanity from the crematoriums when he will never leave him. Well, that's just a little bit, but interesting. And how for granted this generation takes it. And you know, the Jews have their shoulder to the wheel from start to finish, you know that. It makes me think a lot, but it all worked out, and wouldn't it be wonderful if some real maven could have the recipe or the scheme for eternal peace, and you never had to have those stories told to you by someone you loved and adored and was adored and loved by, repeated. Manny used to lecture on the conqueror and the conquered.
Okay, we actually have to pull the plug on this, Mitch, because we got some more people coming in to be interviewed.
That's good.
Here's your first tape.
That's good.
Thank you for